it going out there in YouTube land? Wanted to do a short video to talk about the progress in the carb conversion on this LS powered 944. Last weekend we got it to the point where it ran, and we took it up and down the driveway and went out on the road a little bit, and it is very impressive. As you can see in the video, it spun the tires very easily in first gear, and then when I put it in second gear and gave it like half throttle, it spun the tires again. That was a little surprising. That was effortlessly spinning both tires. So the way that happened was, I started out, basically let out the clutch real easy in first gear, and once the car got rolling, I put the throttle pedal down, maybe halfway, probably a little less, and it spun the tires. It revved up to like 3,500 RPMs. I shifted it in the second, let the clutch out, and then gave it about half throttle again, and it spun the tires again, and then it was time to shift into third. So what that tells me is that the whole bottom half of the throttle pedal feel is completely different than the way it used to be with the fuel injection. If you tried to do any of that when it was fuel injected, it would bog a little first and then go. This is extremely progressive. And in fact, Monday night I went out and just to drive it around a little bit, because I had repaired the fuel pressure manifold that we had on here. So basically it didn't have that stupid T in it anymore. It actually has a proper manifold to pipe the two regulators off of. And I realized it needed gas, so I'm like, oh well, I'll drive to the gas station. And then once I got to the gas station, I was like, this thing is really running pretty good. So then I went out for a drive and put over 20 miles on it, and what I found out is that at low RPM now with this setup, you could drive around in a parking lot, at 1,000, 1,200 RPMs in first gear, and it just does it. There's no drama, there's no bucking. It's not like you gotta pedal the clutch or anything. It's rock solid. And it does the same thing. I mean, I was driving it at 1,200 RPM in fifth gear, and it didn't bother it at all. It just was smooth as anything. So that is exactly what I wanted to do, because with the fuel injection, it may be something wrong with the fuel injection system that I have, or possibly, I don't know, the in-tunability of it at low RPM. There's no data logging on that system, so you can't really tell what's going wrong. But if you tried to drive in a parking lot, put it in first gear, let out the clutch, and try to go slow, like 1,100, 1,200 RPMs, like you would normally drive in a parking lot, it would just start bucking, and there was no way out of it. Even if you gave it gas, it would just buck harder. And the only way to stop it from doing it would be to put your foot on the clutch and release it, and then you'd have to pedal the clutch to keep the car going. It was kind of embarrassing, because it looks like you don't know how to drive a stick shift. So anyway, what I wanted is this thing to drive really easily at low speeds, because when I drive it to work, some of my drive is in bumper to bumper traffic, so it needs to be able to do that really easy clutch out, low RPM first gear, and then stop, and then do it again. It was not even possible to do that with the fuel injection system. So this is really, so far, has cured that problem, which is why I wanted to try the carb conversion, just to see if we could tune that into it. And we haven't even started tuning it yet, and it's definitely doing it. Even though it's doing that and running real good, we have a problem. A couple of videos ago, I showed you how we built this 2-regulator system. Basically, fuel injection pump in this car, factory original one. We don't really want to mess with that. So what we did was left the bypass high pressure fuel injection regulator in there and put a manifold in the pressure line before it, and took this carburetor fuel pressure regulator, plumbed that into that line. So it was seeing 20 psi constant, and then theoretically regulating that down to like 6 psi for the carburetor. And it turns out that doesn't work. 20 psi is too much for that. I could not find any specs on any of these type of regulators for an input pressure. So I was looking at some Aeromotive pressure regulators, and I ended up calling them to ask about that, because I needed to know if I buy their version of that regulator, would it work? And the guy that I talked to said, no, it's not going to work. 20 is too much. Gathering from what he said, you need to be at about 12 to 15, maybe less PSI. So yeah, 20 was not going to work. But fortunately, they make a fuel pressure regulator. It's a dual stage regulator that is designed for taking an EFI car, leaving the stock fuel pump and everything alone, and return lines, and adapting a carburetor to it. So basically, it is kind of the same setup that I have here, except that the high pressure side can regulate down to about 10 or 12 psi. And the carburetor side of it is actually a bypass regulator. This is a deadhead regulator. So I ordered that. Unfortunately, they ain't cheap. So that kind of, I was thinking of going with a Holley EFI system rather than doing the carb conversion, but the fact that I bought a new carburetor rather than using the old one I had, and now I have to buy a fairly expensive fuel pressure regulator, and I had to buy a scoop to put on the thing. Kind of blew the budget on this thing. I mean, all that stuff is like adds up to like $1,100-$1,200. So we were getting close to a Holley FI system on doing the conversion, but so far I am not disappointed that I did this, because it works great. I am certain that once we get the fuel pressure under control, we'll be able to tune this carburetor and it'll run fantastic. And then we can get into tuning the MSD and, maximizing what we can do with that. And we'll give you another quick look at the hood and all its scoopiness. This still has to come off, and I gotta clean it, scuff it, clean it again, and paint it. But that's pretty much what it's gonna look like. I mean, it looks okay, but I like the stock 944 hood, so all the gauges work. Park and brake off. Pretty zippy. You can hear the plugs are starting to load up right now, so have to clear them out, and the light will okay for a minute, and then it'll start loading up again.